When did you first grow curious about the paranormal? Dare you dig deeper? You are listening to House of Asher.
Hey everybody, this is House of Asher. I'm your host, Steve Asher, and we are up on episode 98. We're nearing that 100 mark, and I'm excited about this show. I know everybody says, yeah, I'm so excited about the show, but I'm really excited about the show. And what we're going to get into, we're going to get into a lot of stuff because our guest is an extremely varied person, has a lot of background and a whole lot of different stuff and a lot of interest, and we're really going to get into that in just a minute. I probably should do a proper sort of lead into this. Let's try to act semi-professional, I guess. Miss Linda Zimmerman, as an author, has written the Ghost Investigator series, Mind Over Matter, America's Historical Haunts, or Historic Haunts, sorry, In the Night Sky, as well as appearing on things like Paranormal Survivor and numerous radio shows. I want to go ahead and mention the websites GoToZim.com and GhostInvestigator.com. And I guess I should go ahead and say, hey, Linda, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And, it's one of these things that we speak to different people, and, it's just kind of part of the thing, when you do a book or you do a series, you do a whatever, different speaking engagements. You kind of go on the circuit and do this and that. And we just have never crossed paths, and I'm really appreciative of you being on the show today.
Well, I'm happy to. I'm sure we're going to have a good time, and there's no shortage of things to talk about, is there?
No, absolutely. And that's the thing that I was kind of saying before when we kind of started touching base is that I'm an hour show. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to say I'm a light snack, but I'm not a 4-course thing. This is like, we'll hit some stuff, and then if you would honor us, come back and we'll hit on some other things. But, I like to give kind of a general overview of what you do to people. Or do for people. You do stuff to people too, I'm sure.
What I do to people. How much time do you have?
Oh man, this is a family show, so I should probably keep that brief. But just for the people who have been, under rocks or just not aware of all the stuff that you're into, can you give a little bit more of a Reader's Digest version beyond kind of what I talked about?
Sure. I have been investigating haunted sites predominantly in the Northeast for about 25 years and writing about my best cases in the, as you mentioned, the Ghost Investigator series. It was not anything I intended on doing for a career. I was actually a research chemist for many years, but I wanted to write, and I have always been drawn to the bizarre, and it just seemed a natural fit. And in, I'd say the last 10 years, I've also been writing about UFO cases. And I write science fiction. I have 3 zombie novels, which are very close to my heart. And I just have a lot of fun speaking with people about my work. So I'm looking forward to tonight.
It's funny because you were talking about the zombie thing, which actually I need to do one thing before we get into that. I should have done it at the top of the show. I want to make sure to, most people are probably listening to this on Spreaker right now. They may be listening to on my YouTube channel, House of Asher, iTunes, Spotify, iHeart, and also on the Paranormal UK radio station, which carries me globally. I had to say that because I'm going to get so caught up with this, I'm going to forget. And is there any other sites that we should mention that I did not mention at the top of the show?
No, the GoToZim, GoToZim, basically is a gateway to all of the different things I do. And all my books, I think, are available on Amazon, and there's so many different ebooks. I don't even know how many versions there are anymore. So that's the nutshell version.
Well, I mean, you're certainly prolific in what you do, and so I mean, it's looking back like you started writing, if I'm not mistaken, in regards of published works around, was it 2006 or was it earlier than that?
Oh no, mid 90s. I first started writing, and the 2000s were very very, and was usually coming out with 1 to 2 books a year for a span there. And it's just been a wild ride, and I've enjoyed every minute of it.
You know, being a, and I use a very small W when I say this, a writer myself, semi-writer, I guess I should say, but it's a chore to that. And I know it sounds like, it's like you talk to people and they see somebody on the screen. It's like, I do so many long hours, and it's so, and I'm away from my family. Like, man, you're in Hollywood, dude. But people don't get it. They don't understand there really is. You really got to sacrifice for your art if you want to get kind of dramatic about it, and I certainly do. It's just one of those things people maybe don't always realize it. And I'm like, man, if I had a hat, I'd tip it.
Well, thank you. I love what I do, so I'm fortunate. But yes, there are very long hours. I mean, I can't tell you how many times over the last 20 years, I get up, I'm still in my bathrobe, I start writing, and I realize it's evening, and I just, the whole day will go. But when you're doing what you enjoy, and come on, I get to write about haunted sites.
Right.
What's more exciting, right? I'm not writing about the stock exchange. I'm writing about ghosts and these incredible cases. And so there's
Okay.
literally never a dull moment in
Okay.
this field.
Okay, I've got an idea. You can write about the stock exchange, but you're going to call it like the spook exchange. And we're about haunted
I could do.
cases. Okay, just give me credit in the bag. Say thanks for the idea, Steve. But but no, seriously. I mean, there's that thing of it doesn't matter where you're at. You can talk to Inuit people. You can talk to people, in huts and in different, far flung jungles, and there's always a ghost story. There's always some weird, odd, unusual, and it's not always got to be bad. There's some stories of protectors of the woods and things like that. That, I mean, if you're in there messing up, sure, but I mean, it's meant to kind of bolster respect for the woods and all that. Kind of a Swamp Thing type of deal. I grew up in a
Yeah,
lot of
it's
80s movies.
the topic. Yeah, the topic is definitely universal, and it has been self-perpetuating in that I do a book signing or a lecture on, whatever the new book was, and 20 people would come up to you afterwards and start telling you their story. And can you come to my house or business, or you should look into this? And it's
Every
like,
time,
well,
yeah.
here we go for the next, for the next book. So,
And thank God
um,
for it, right? I mean,
oh, sure.
it's just like, when one piston goes up to kind of use automotive, boom, the fire comes from another one, it goes back up, and it's just like you said, it's just a self-perpetuating type of thing. When you were small, let's go way back. Just get back on the couch, put your feet up. When you were small, I would assume you had like a Eureka or a Batman or some sort of whatever sort of way you want to describe it. A gotcha moment where it's like, okay, I'm digging this. This is something I want to do. Or even maybe you didn't even have that type of thought. It's just you naturally went toward that. Was there a point in time? Was there a series of points in time, or did it just always was there as long as you could remember it?
Well, again, it wasn't anything I thought I would do, but I was really fascinating. And nobody's ever asked me this. There was a gotcha moment. I was reading a book about hauntings, and there was a case in Jamaica where somebody died. It was a relative nobody liked, and they put the coffin in this crypt. And when they came back, I don't know, months later, all the coffins, these big, heavy coffins, were standing up, jumbled, all tossed around. And this freaked me out. And this kept happening. They'd rearrange the coffins. It kept happening until they removed the relative nobody liked. And let me tell you, that made an enormous impression on me. And so when I finally decided years later, how it came about that I started doing this, I was talking about local history. It was my county's bicentennial. So I was giving a series of history lectures, but people kept asking me for ghost stories. And I said, this is something I've been interested in for, since I was a little kid. So that's really what got me started. And, once you go to one haunted site, you're hooked.
Right. Oh, exactly. And that's what's I guess what had this big proliferation of so many people that want to go do investigations and stuff. So it's one of these things. I've said this 100 times. People probably wish they had a quarter every time they heard me say it, but I'm an investigator. I'm not really a ghost hunter. Like I said, I don't have any like ghost skins on my wall or ghost heads, stuff like that. Casper, but there is a rush to it, and there's nothing wrong with that. You've got a couple different camps, right? You got some of these guys that are really mega serious, like Professor Snape, just not any room to discuss this, right? It has to be to this point and in this way. No smiling, right? And then you have some that are just like really don't follow any kind of scientific method, and they're just there for the kicks, They're just what's the old saying? What are you rebelling against? What do you got? Those kind of kids, they're just out having a blast.
Right.
I fall somewhere in the middle of that. I try to keep it on the rails enough that I can come off semi competent, but I don't, I'm not that guy, man. I'm not that super dark, serious guy. I can't be. I'm too goofy. Where do you roll with it?
Definitely. Well, when I would be doing an investigation, it would be with the hope I would have enough material to write about or talk about, but that didn't always happen. And you can't be serious for 6, 8 hours. You have to laugh and break the tension sometime because you're going into murder and suicide sites and places of great tragedy. And, you're in the dark, in the basement of some horror house, something where something terrible happened.
Right.
You're under a lot of tension.
Gallows humor, you've got to have that lever break,
absolutely.
That pressure break, and
and I was fortunate because for many years, my ghost hunting partner is a police officer, Michael Warden, and he's got as twisted a sense of humor as I do. So we would be doing the serious work, but something would happen where we'd end up, laughing for a while, which is exactly what you need, because you need to keep your focus and you need to break that tension on a regular basis.
Right. Well, okay. I have an EMT joke for you.
Okay.
Hey, what's that in the road? Ahead. And that's the joke. That's the entire joke. It is so awful. But if you know people, why am I laughing at my own jokes? What a goon. But I've got a lot of friends, of course, that do paramedic work. I have law enforcement background. I get it. And people that are not in the kind of the group of it, you're going to scare the straights, So you kind of keep kind of tight-lipped, but then when you're in your buddies, man, it's wide open. And I think it's necessary. You got to. You have to be able to loosen it up. And I think it frees your mind up. And I think you're more receptive to seeing and hearing and whatever than being just white-knuckled walking through somewhere.
Right. And it's the same when you write. If you can't keep the audience, like when I'm writing the zombie novels, you can't have 250 pages of nonstop horror. You need to have those lighter moments to break the tension so that you can, bring the audience back to that point. And at least that's the way I like to write and investigate. You just have to have a balance. Again, I think it keeps you focused.
Yeah. Well, I mean, do you have, when I say this again, man, I'm coming into the man. Hey, buddy, oh, pal, ma'am. Sorry, I get very, very
Whatever.
easy
Call
and
me
chummy
Zim.
with people.
My friends call me Zim.
Okay, Zim. So, like, I'm going to ask you a question, and it's going to sound very. I don't want it to come off like this, but like, do you have a process, or do you have a ritual? Humans love ritual. I mean, just look at religion. There is a certain thing some people do. I love listening to music, especially if it's something that's early 20th century or before. I love listening to stuff in that time, or chamber music or whatever. Or maybe if it was something that happened in the 50s or the 70s, I'll throw in some, I don't know, Skinnerd or something. Something that gives a little bit of that scent and that flavor to the story. Is there something that you do? Because I know some people's like, well, they got a favorite hat they wear when they write, or some ball players, which it's different. Maybe they got a favorite pair of socks or something. Do you have that, or you pretty much I just sat down and started doing it?
Um, it's pretty much whenever the mood strikes, which is most days. No, apart from just being comfortable, um, that's when I write the best, when I don't need to do anything particular, just be comfortable, and I'm ready to go.
And right now there's probably 8,000 writers beating their head against the speaker, going, "Why can't I do that?" It's so funny because sometimes I know, and I'm sorry, I'm not trying to talk about me, but you can relate to this, I'm sure. Sometimes you've tried to write some stuff. Everyone's got a manuscript or seven that they've kind of started, but it's not quite fell into place, or they maybe don't feel they've got their voice for the story quite yet. And then other things you can crank out like you're making sausages or hot dogs, right? But for some reason, there's certain that's sort of the great, what was it called, the Moby Dick, the white whale that people just can't quite get. Um, how often have you dealt with that? Have you ever dealt with writer's block or anything like that?
Uh, Knocking on wood, no,
Here, let me do it for you.
because
There you go.
yeah, thank you. When I it's the preparation for me. I'll give you an example. We'll go back to the zombie novel. When I was writing it, I had I was riding my bicycle every day, and there was this 19-mile path I would ride. And as I'm riding, I am going through the story. Well, if the character does, what would they say? I live it all in my head before I sit down and write it, usually. Um, I try to become the characters. You know what I'm saying? The story is in my head before I start trying to type it out. And if it's nonfiction, if it's one of my ghost books or history books or whatever, it's an enormous amount of research and notes. And again, by the time I sit down to write something, the story is all there. It just needs to be polished
Transcribed.
and
Yeah.
right. It needs to be polished and put into, a good format. So I don't get up in the morning, sit at my computer. All right, I'm going to write something brilliant now. What am I going to write about? No, it's you need the story or the format to be in you before you go to the writing. And I think I'm not sure, but I think a lot of people I've spoken to who have writer's block or just can't finishing they're forcing it too much. Live the story in your head, and then it should flow easily.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I will say on my end, you definitely have to prepare. You definitely have to know the subject matter. I'm not that guy that's got like the strings and the push pins, like looks like you're trying to catch the killer type guy. But I'll definitely write down kind of a skeleton thing, key points, unmovable things that have to happen for the story to fall into place. And then I build, sub stories and kind of about it and whatnot. And but then again, sometimes you get in front of the board, you start typing it out, get kind of a loose thing. You're thinking you're going to get 2 or 3 pages. You get 15, 20 pages, and 50 pages, and then sometimes it shapes up into a short story or to a full novel. And that's sort of the magic of that for me. And I know we're kind of like, was this Writers Roundtable? Well, yeah, it is right now, everybody. But it's just
No,
something.
you're right. And it is a kind of magic. And you can't, again, I can't stress enough, you can't force it, because once you start writing something, you have to go where it's naturally going to progress. And you can tell when you're reading something, you're like, oh boy, the author really forced this because, they're sticking to something preconceived, or, they wanted to get X amount of pages out of it, whatever. Sometimes the characters go off and do their own thing, and you have to let them.
Right. Well, I mean, what was the thing? I know this guy as well as I know anything. He said, "Kill your darlings." You know,
Yes.
sometimes it's necessary. Well, the sort of subject matter that you write, just like say a Stephen King or a Stephen Asher. There's sometimes stories don't end pretty. This isn't a Care Bear book. You know,
No, no.
so
And yeah, when you're writing ghost stories in particular, you're sticking to what facts you have. But again, as I was saying, you're going to sites of murders and suicides. There will be no happy ending to that.
no cake after this, kids. I'm sorry, man. Well, let me ask you this, and I swear I'll get off kind of touching on the nuances and the intricacies of writing. Does it? Do you ever carry it? Do you ever, you know, when I was writing my first book about the penitentiary, I really got into the subject matter, digging into it, and even my own experiences. I actually had nightmares. I mean, I know it sounds so silly. I'm not saying like my book was so scary it gave myself nightmares, but I'm just saying you kind of get into that subject matter and you run in it constantly, and it's sort of hard to shut it off sometimes. At least it was for me. Um,
Oh, shutting it off is the hardest thing. You you go to a haunted site and you're spending all night there in this intense, stressful situation. I can't come home and shut that off, particularly if you've had, some sort of contact with whatever this is, or it's, slammed the door next to you or pushed you, or you don't come home and say, okay, that's the end of that investigation. I'll go to sleep now. No, some of these cases have literally haunted me for days, weeks. Some of them I still shudder to think, of the situations and what I've been through. So I warn people, you mentioned Casper before, be careful what you ask for if you want to go investigate a truly haunted place, because it can be terrifying and it can mess with you.
well, I'd actually had a gentleman on who was a archbishop. He was actually part of a group of demonologists and exorcists, and you know, uh, you hear a lot of different people. And how do I say this? Because I'm gonna get hate mail. Okay. And this guy was like old. I'm sorry, dude. You were old. Don't take that wrong. But what I mean is he's learned. He put his time in. He was not some like 20-year-old kid coming in and going, boom, I'm a demonologist. This guy had went through all the getting ordained and getting the calling and then getting all that different grooming that goes into being like a legitimate whatever. And I'm not saying that there aren't people with gifts 100%, but you know, even he said, being a man of the cloth, that you know that sort of stuff is going to cling to you, especially if you're kind of going somewhere when there's a lot of dark entities. I don't really like throwing out demons or whatever, because I don't know. I don't know what's over there. I don't even know if there's ghosts. I just know there's really strange stuff that happens. But have you had anything cling to you, like anything memorable that you can think of that kind of maybe made you think of not doing what you do?
Yes, over the years there have been some. There was one in particular where a man in front of family members had shot himself to death. And I had the brilliant idea during the investigation of sitting on the suicide site to see if I could connect. And it was just awful. It was like, I don't know, I was in his head, he was in my head, whatever, but I just felt and experienced the anguish and the fear, the all of it. It was one of my worst experiences, and to this day, uh, it's like something you can taste and smell, and it's so real to you if you do get that sort of connection. And yeah, for days I was not myself. And you have to think, well, I'm doing this, why? um but then it kind of fades, you get over it, and you find yourself doing the same thing somewhere else. But yeah, I don't sit on suicide spots anymore. But yes, it's the nature of the beast here. You're you're going into situations where there are very unhappy spirits. People don't call me usually if they're having, this friendly spirit and everything's fine. They're usually terrified in their own homes. Their kids are terrified. Something's happening
Right.
that is not right and is really scary. And that's usually what I walk into.
Right. I'm waiting for that day, and I'm joking here, but waiting for that day when it's like, hey, we have the ghost of the Easter Bunny. He has some candy here, or hey, whatever. This ghost, it's cold spots, but makes the best upside down, pineapple cake. I'm there, but until that day comes, I'll keep going where it's creepy. I was going to ask you too, discussing creepy. What a segue, right? You had sent me a few things. You'd sent me a couple pictures and actually an EVP. What's going on with this one that you have sent me? What you call the creepy boy.
Creepy boy. Yes. We were at a site that they were, seeing full-bodied apparitions. Not too terrifying, and they were identified as former owners. Unnerving for the kids for sure. But the really unnerving part of this property was when they moved in, the only thing previous owners left was this painting of a little boy, done probably in the 60s or 70s. And it was up in the attic, and the owner said, I don't even like to look at it. And so I'm with my friend, Mike, who's the police officer, and a psychic, Barbara. And we're like, oh, come on. How bad can the painting of a little boy be? So she's like, all right, I'm warning you. So she goes up in the attic, brings it down, turns it around. We literally gasped. It was one of those moments where we were all like, ah, we all said, I think my first reaction was, oh, that's just not right. It just looks like a little boy. Some people say it kind of looks like Macaulay Culkin playing with blocks or something. But we all immediately said, he's dead. And we felt his spirit was attached to this painting. Now, if it was done in the 60s or 70s, and this was about 10 years ago, there was a good chance this boy should still be alive, grown up. But we were absolutely convinced he was dead, and there was something wrong with him, and he was attached to this painting. Well, we come to find out that several years after this painting was finished, this boy rode his bicycle off a cliff to commit suicide.
Ah, my God. How old was the kid?
He was in his teens when he did it, I believe, late teens.
So they're thinking this was like an honest to God suicide. It wasn't like an accidental. It was like he had some issues and he just took
had
his life.
issues. He had issues,
Oh,
and you could, if you've ever investigated asylums, you can almost feel or taste
It's
that
palatable.
Yes, that chaotic type of energy. And there was something about this boy, like I said, my immediate reaction, oh, there's something not right here. And so suicide victim who is now attached to his painting. And that painting is actually now hanging in a museum, a paranormal museum. And it's probably the one thing that most people have a reaction to. Quick story, when I brought the painting to the museum, there was some, young strapping carpenter guy doing some work on the museum, and he's a real outdoorsy, not afraid of anything guy. He looked at this painting. He's like, get it out of this room. I can't even look at it. And that's the reaction a lot of people have to this. It's the creepy boy painting.
Well, I'll tell you this, because, they talked about different things like Robert the Haunted Doll and whatnot, and the Curse of the Blue Boy and things like that.
Right.
I'm looking at this, and I glanced at it before, but I really didn't want to get, I wanted my reaction to be live with you. It's so strange because there's elements of it that's very well done. the delicateness of the articulation of the fingers and of the toes and all that, which everybody, I will make sure to put this up on stevieasher.com for you guys to check out. And but there's, yeah, the eyes just have a real weird, just a strange piercing vibe to them. It's yeah,
Yes.
it makes you not. I'm stuttering. I apologize, but it makes you want to look away. It's creepy. You nailed it.
There you go. And to add another level of creepiness, the man who painted he was of Chinese descent. In fact, he wrote a very famous Chinese cookbook, I think in the 60s. And he was also a painter. He lived in that house. He painted this. This was a neighbor boy. And one of the things that happens there all the time is neighbors will call this woman in her house and said, while you were away, we saw this guy on your porch by your front door. We don't know what he's doing there. And she'd say, well, what did he look like? He said, well, he was some Chinese guy. So the man who painted this portrait is haunting the place where this portrait was as well.
Something I'm curious to learn, and part of me kind of wants you to tell me yes. When this painting went into the Paranormal Museum, did the Chinese guy, I don't know his name, so I'm just calling him the Chinese guy,
yes,
did he follow this?
That's an excellent question. I don't know the answer to that.
That'd be a neat twist, though.
That certainly would, and I actually wouldn't doubt it. And it was unnerving when I was driving. I went to pick it up because the woman finally years later said, I want this out of my place. Just take it. So to drive it to the museum, I had to drive up and over this steep mountain along a cliff. And I was like, I'm not looking in the rearview mirror. I don't want to see if creepy boy is in my car. I was just so on edge that this painting hadn't left its location in like 40 years. And what am I doing? I'm driving along a cliff to bring it to this museum.
Oh, that would actually make an excellent screenplay. And you look over in the driver's side and there's a little boy. And it's like,
and I drive over the
yes,
cliff. Yeah.
And because you're looking at them going, and then you have like the 1970s car going on.
Remember,
like,
right.
That would be so good.
Picture it now, a Gran Torino going.
Yes, it has to be a Gran Torino. It's like a Kolchak the Night Stalker episode or something.
So that's why I do what I do. I mean, these stories, she didn't bring the painting down and say this boy committed suicide. She didn't know. And it wasn't until, we talked to neighbors and everything to find out the story of what happened to him. But we were absolutely convinced he died and something was, not normal in his life.
Well, I mean, if you sit and look at everything from Carrie and Firestarter and pretty much anything when there's, kids dealing with a lot of stuff and, they always say you have so much pituitary activity, and that's when your mind's really flashing and flooded with all those hormones and super active. Yeah, I mean, maybe part of that energy, and maybe part of it was the Asian person. I don't know what to call the guy. The Chinese man.
The Chinese man, yes.
Like I said, please don't send any letters. I'm not trying to be bad. But it's a thing where maybe he was very close to this person, and he was trying to pour his grief and his trying to work through this. Maybe it was a friend of the family. I don't know. But I think a lot of times when people do that, and the reason I say is we had a son we'd lost a few years ago, and we've had people do things. Well, we were lucky to have him. We adopted him, had him for 7 years, and unfortunately a seizure happened, but that's not important. I mean, you know what I mean, for the story. But, people have done little things and drew little things, but thank God, we never had anything, pop off like that. But there are, it does make sense. And there's a lot of loss, and that conjures up a lot of emotion. I was going to ask you though too, the Pomona infrared figure. What's that about?
Yes, that's the best photograph um, I've taken in my 25 years of ghost investigating.
That is super
Um,
solid looking. You know, it really.
yes, it is. This was a house probably built around the 1960s. And I got a call woman who was renting it. And she said, "We are moving out in a couple of weeks. We can't stand it. All this kind of poltergeist activity, slamming footsteps going up and down. They had two dogs die, pretty bizarre circumstances. Things would actually fly across the room and smash against the opposite wall." And she said the worst part, though, when they'd wake up in the middle of the night, this dark figure would be leaning over the bed staring at them.
Oh no!
Yes,
Ah, that's the
yes,
worst.
the worst. So, of course, me being me, I'm coming right over.
Well, yeah, what's that noise in the basement? I'll go check. Exactly.
So, yes, so this was this was pure evil. I do not use that term often. This one was evil. You felt it as soon as you pulled into the driveway. Um, Very heavy, unnerving atmosphere, and it just liked to taunt you. We would be upstairs and you'd hear this slamming, banging going on downstairs. You'd go downstairs, you'd hear it upstairs. It was just playing games, and not in a playful way. And it's getting towards the end of the evening, and I'm packing up my gear. You have these bags of gear, and I'm sitting in the living room, and it's very, very dimly lit. And the woman who was renting it was standing behind me, and there's a faint light coming through these sheer curtains, and I see something dark and solid moving from right to left in front of these curtains. So I still had my infrared camera. I just start snapping pictures, and I couldn't really see anything. It was kind of too dark. And I said, "Something just blocked the light. Um, Maybe you have a street light outside and a truck went by." She said, "No, we're like 100 feet from the road or more, and there are no street lights." She said, "That light is mounted on the outside of the house. So the only way that light could be blocked is if something was in the room with you." And I'll never forget that. So it wasn't until I got home and pulled out the disc and put it in the computer that I saw what was in the room with me. And talk about cold chill gasp when I saw that about 20 feet away from me was this dark, it looks almost hunchbacked, right?
Almost, yeah. And
Yeah, like a hunched over figure. And that's exactly what they were seeing, that would be in their bedroom staring at them.
did you get? I mean, I'm not saying full on, but like nausea when you encountered that. Like it hitting your
Um,
stomach, almost not saying you're an lurch or retch, but definitely like your stomach was twisted up when you seen that.
oh, yeah, because you just got this sense this was a sick individual who particularly didn't like women.
Mm.
And again, we come to find out, I don't know how graphic we want to get, but he used to perform illegal operations on women
Oh,
in his home. And they found a lot of specimen jars in the basement.
so we're talking early, probably abortionist type things.
Yes,
Wow.
yes. And I brought a psychic there later, and I never tell the psychics where we're going, and you don't want to influence them. And as soon as we pulled in the drive, she goes, "Oh my God, Linda, where have you brought me?" She said the same exact thing. This guy loved to experiment on women, and just a sick, evil person.
Jesus. Well, see, that's the thing. No, I'm looking at that, and there's certain times that you get vibes from stuff. I'm not saying I'm have a gift or anything, maybe slightly empathic, and that probably is just from being, in law enforcement and things as long as I was. But nothing good comes from a hunched over, cloaked, pitch black figure. And I was gonna say also in that you had mentioned something about they had some dogs. Do you see something? I thought it was a dog on the couch. Very bright eyes. Off to the
Oh,
right. Do you see this?
I will have to look again. Other people think they have seen a second figure off
Behind the
to the right.
couch.
Other people, I
Mm-hmm.
will look more closely at that again. But you could be right.
Yeah,
It would make sense.
could be the first time, right? So, but no, and that's the thing. What I have friends that do all kinds of different stuff, and sometimes I've got guys that've been like in Desert Storm and dealt with real life and death stuff, much more bad A than me. And I'll show them stuff like that, and they're going, "Nope, check, please. No." I said, "Man, you go against terrorists in real life." I said, "Yeah, but I'll shoot them and they'll stop." That stuff,
Right.
nuh-uh, because one of those things getting to me, it's over with. He says, I can't even, and that's what a lot of people are afraid of things of like possession and things like that. I was going to ask you too, do you feel that, obviously, objects can hold stuff? Do you feel that they can be infested by dark power, or do you think like an actual possession, which I don't know if you've even really researched that. I mean, I know you've done stuff with zombies and whatnot, which is different. Um, have you ever been somewhere where you either felt the home was possessed by, obviously this place would be a very good example, but to where it affected the family in a negative way, like they moved to a place where the guy, like you said here, was a real a-hole, and maybe the father or the son or so whoever begins taking on dark attributes. Or I guess it could be the
Absolutely.
daughters
Yeah,
too. Yeah.
absolutely. These hauntings can be so severe they affect you mentally. I know of a case where, you know, several cases where families just break apart. The parents get divorced. The kids try to run away. There's enough stress with normal life without some sort of evil or negative presence, affecting all of you. There was a case where a woman committed suicide. The haunting was so severe. She was fine when she moved in. Yes, there can be a lot of reasons for it, but her friends and family commented she just started becoming so upset and unbalanced over this, and she killed herself. And then that, of course, is going to add to the haunting. That I think any time there's something in your home that doesn't make you feel comfortable there. I mean, the home should be the one place on planet Earth where you feel safe and comfortable. And if there's some spirit entity, whatever you want to call that, who is disturbing that peace, that's harm enough, I think.
Well, something I'm curious about too, and people, you got to see this picture. Like I said, you brought me two really weird pictures, and also an EVP we're going to discuss in a minute. And I can only sit and think, this is every day for you. I mean, I'll do research in places, and I'll check out places, and whatever, and then the general line, who have died here and whatever, and is it on ley lines or anything like that. But these are super freaky. Now the people that lived here before, and even let me ask you this. Sorry, I'm rambling. The guy who did all this dark surgery,
Hmm.
was he, because like I said, you do see multiple things. Was this like a group of kind of like underground scientists that were, maybe like eugenicists or something like that, that were basically taking these women in bad situations and more or less whatever, like, yeah, just working on them in regards, almost like secret dark science. I
Uh,
wonder if that
uh,
could be possible.
yeah, I don't know of anyone else involved. As far as I know, he was just, maybe he was even a serial killer. He, just somebody who's dark and twisted. And I should point out that he died of cancer in the house as well.
I, I don't say this often, but good.
Yeah,
I hope it was a long one and he hurt a lot. I'm sorry.
yeah, yeah. Well, payback is, can I
Uh-huh.
say,
Lay it on
the
me.
B word?
Sure, lay it on me.
Uh, Payback is a bitch.
Naughty. You're so naughty. I'll tell you, Zim. This is I joke, but if I'd seen that in real time, that would bother me. I'd seen one shadow figure when I was a little boy. It's one of the things that got me into this because it scared me so bad. You know the old saying, the only thing to fear is fear itself. And so I started going to libraries and I started studying all this, spontaneous combustion and demonic entities and all this kind of stuff and ESP and all this different stuff. And I kind of started to get a little bit of a foothold, or at least enough to gain enough confidence to not think something's going to drag me under the floor, under the floorboards or into the attic, right?
Right.
But the one time that I saw something like that, it changed me, and I don't know how I would act now. Literally, if I saw something in real time like that, that would bother me.
Yeah, it does change you, and that is one of the detriments of doing what I do. You could say maybe it makes you stronger, but so much negativity. You have to be a pile of bricks to not feel what's going on in these places. But on the other hand, if I can do anything to break that haunting, bring awareness to it, at least try to help the homeowners not be as afraid, to let them know, I don't perform exorcisms or anything like that, but there was one very dark haunting and this woman was so affected by it. She just kept all the curtains closed and sat quietly and just, what was that noise? What was that? Was that it? It was just ruining her whole life.
Right,
She
a
lost her,
subjugated person.
yes, she lost her job. And I don't know how long we were there. I think I just put my meters down. I said, no, you know what? We know what's here. We know what it's doing. I said, open the curtains, put on your favorite music, get out of the house, do this. I had never done that before. And I wasn't quite yelling at her, but I was like, you have just fed this so much. And so we're opening all the curtains. She's putting on her music, and there's light and there's music and thing. Within 2 weeks, she had her dream job. The haunting stopped because she was not feeding it anymore. So that's one of my highlight cases where it didn't take any great talent or scientific instruments. You just saw what was going on, and you put your foot down and say, enough. You have the upper hand. You're alive. Take charge and live your life. Don't do don't live it according to what this thing's trying to make you do.
Well, the thing that strikes me is, and I'm going to make up words here because I'm not sure. I guess I could probably use some humanitarian. So I say, you're not an exorcist, but you are a humanitarian. And what you did, you reconnected with that person who had probably cut all ties to anybody she knew. Obviously, she lost her
Yes.
job and all that. There's nothing worse, and I'm sure you've encountered this. There's some folks that, for whatever reason, I'm not saying they necessarily have an issue, but they not just like, oh, isn't it cool? Kind of like in the poltergeist stuff where they set the kid in the floor and they slid across there, and the husband's like, no, I don't want to do that. But there's some people that's like, well, I don't want them to go. So, but they're scratching your kids. And they're like so kind of under the influence of whatever this is. It bothers me. And there's certain people you can help and certain people that you can help. And that's, again, one of those, you are left carrying that. I do want to ask you this before we get too deep into the last 10 minutes or so of the show. Old Ulster County Jail. Now, we had talked about an EVP off air a little bit and somewhat through the show. Apparently, the inmates have been relocated to a new jail. And so let's talk a little bit about this.
Yes. I was contacted by one of the corrections officers who worked in the old Ulster County Jail. And as you mentioned, it was abandoned. I won't say abandoned. It was empty because all the prisoners had been transferred. but he was telling me stories of just about everyone who worked there saw entities floating along the ceiling, passing through walls. Inmates were freaked out on a regular basis because there'd be these apparitions, walking the corridors. So I went with a corrections officer, a member of the sheriff's department, Mike, um, and we set up in different, these jails are pretty large, I think 3 or 4 levels and 2 tiers on either side. So it's a lot of territory to cover. And a lot of the times we will set up equipment in one location and you get out of that location. So, if anybody's sneezing, coughing, their stomach is rumbling, you don't get any questionable evidence. So I had a digital recorder down the end of one of the tiers or the cell blocks. And, at the end of the night, you collect everything and then you spend long, boring days, staring at video and listening to audio. And I'm sitting in my chair, probably half falling asleep, and there's nothing, nothing, nothing. And all of a sudden, I hear this voice say, Sarah. And I literally almost fell out of my chair, and I played it back. And to me, it was a man's voice whispering, Sarah. So this was a man's, excuse me?
No, I was saying, yeah, I definitely would say it was a male. And
Mm-hmm.
it's so strange. When you recorded it, did you hear it?
No, because we were not, you can hear distant voices right before that because we were probably 90 feet away at the entrance to the cell block. No one was in that cell block when I recorded this. No one was within 90 feet of this, and it sounds like it was very close to the microphone. So I listened a couple of times. I send the clip to this corrections officer, and I didn't say what I heard,
Right.
because again, you don't want to prejudice it.
Right, influence.
Well, he calls me back, in 2 minutes. Who's Sarah? I said,
It's like, who's Deanna?
Yeah, who's Deanna? So I said, you tell me. So he went and talked to every corrections officer he could find, asking, do you know any connection to Sarah? Well, talk about disturbing. He finds out that a corrections officer who was there, I think in the 70s, he said, oh, I know who Sarah was, and it's a story involving someone who was in the cell right where I had the digital recorder. It was a man who asked to make a phone call to his wife. He himself, the corrections officer, brought this man to the phone, and the man saying to his wife, please tell Sarah how sorry I am. Please ask her to forgive me. I can't believe what I did to Sarah. It was a father who was abusing his daughter named Sarah. After the phone call, he said this man had an odd look on his face after the call, and 45 minutes later, they found he hung himself in his cell. And that's where I'm covered in goosebumps. That's where we got that recording. And again, we could not have made this up because nobody present that night had known this story. It was this retired corrections officer who knew what had happened there.
Okay, Zim, I'm going to play this real quick because
Sure.
we only got a few minutes left, but I want people to hear this, and I'll probably play it once, and then I'll play it again because it's a short clip. But everybody, listen in. This is creepy. Ah, man, and it almost. I know he says he's sorry, but it sounds real kind of vivacious. Sarah. It just sounds really effed up. I can't say it any other way. But here, let's listen to that again real quick. Okay, one more time. No, I got goosebumps too. I don't like that. Jeez, yeah. Um, Thanks for the nightmares. I appreciate that.
My job here is done.
I guess so, yeah. And like I said, you understand, I've been doing this. I'm 49 years old. I've been doing this for about 30 years now, and these are certifiably creepy freaking things you brought along here. I'm only wondering what you still got in your bag of tricks, maybe for another show.
Plenty.
Oh my
You do
gosh.
it this long. Yeah, those were the ones that came to mind because they are just very disturbing, and I think, with the photo and with this clip, clear evidence to me.
Well, I want to say this real quick. Please go to zim.com and also check out ghostinvestigator.com. Check out, I'm telling you, if you just started picking up one book at a time by Linda Zimmerman, you'd be reading for quite a while. You may need glasses when you're done, but that's okay. Don't let me, maybe it's in audio books too, so maybe you don't have to look and read at it. But is there anything else you want to throw out before we get into that last minute or so of the conversation?
No, I think I let the cases speak for themselves.
Yeah, I'm telling you, you would be so fun at children's parties, and especially if you were like, Zimmo, the crazy clown lady. I'm saying.
Yes, and I'll bring the creepy boy painting.
Oh gosh, please don't. That's disturbing. Yeah, I may actually delete that thing. I don't even know if I think I want it on my computer. It's such a messed up looking thing. You spooked me. Good job.
Like I said, my job here is done now.
Jeez, I'm crow. Well, let me say this. Everybody, please make sure to visit those sites. Also, check out stevieasher.com. That's steveeasher.com, where I'll have these photos up with your permission.
Yes, sure.
Okay. And feel free to check them out and comment. And if it's okay, I would suggest maybe if you see some different stuff in those photos, if you're okay with that, have them contact you and kind of say, well, hey, I see this and that.
Please do. And not to get too overly spiritual here, but creepy boy, we laugh about it, but it was a sad, terrible end. So I always ask for people to send your good thoughts to his disturbed spirit.
Exactly. And because, like you said, it's not necessarily the method that you passed, it's the fact that you passed. You're through that veil. Everything that's here, I hope, becomes negated, and you have that next step, be it another dimension, another vibrational plane, or who knows, maybe you come back. I don't know. My two sons, their family are Asian, and so I've got to learn a lot about Buddhism and reincarnation and things like that. So who knows, maybe we'll have a chance to redo it again. Could you imagine? I wonder how many lives you went through as a ghost hunter.
Oh boy, I don't think this is my first paranormal rodeo.
That's actually a really good idea for here in Kentucky. We should put together a paranormal rodeo. We can no, listen. We can get chip coffee on we can get chip coffee on a bull, and then we can get. He's probably gonna send me a really horrible email. But think about it. I would pay to see chip coffee on a bull.
I would too. All right, I admit it.
Oh, that's good times. Well, well, listen, we're on the down. What a way to leave this conversation. Chip coffee on a bull.
I think it's time to end the show.
I think it's too far off the rails. There's no return, folks. Again, Linda Zimmerman, thank you for being here, and I do hope you'll come back. And if you'll let me finish my segue, I'll be right back with you.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Oh my dear Lord, the many winding, strange, and curious paths we went in this episode, and I had to take the blame for that. This woman may never come back. Okay. She said off air she's a co-conspirator. Okay, we'll take that. But until then, enjoy the sunlight, go out there, have fun and frolic. But as the shadows grow long and night falls, check under your bed, check under your window, check out your back hallway. There may be something great, or maybe, chip coffee on a bull, God knows what. But until then, love each other, love yourselves. But don't be afraid to be a little scared, because sometimes in fear is learning. And until next time, everybody, Take care.